April 29, 1945. Potsdamer Platz, Berlin. Unterscharführer Eugène Vaulot, a French volunteer serving with SS Sturmbataillon Charlemagne, crouches in the wreckage of what used to be a government ministry. He is 22 years old. He is holding a stamped steel tube that weighs 6 kilograms and cost the Reich less than 30 Reichsmarks to produce. In the next 8 hours, Vaulot destroys 6 Soviet tanks with Panzerfauste, 6 T-34s, 6 46,000-pound machines, each one representing thousands of man-hours of Ural factory labor, killed by a disposable metal pipe filled with black powder and a shaped charge warhead the size of a dinner plate. That evening, SS Brigade Führer Krukenberg awards Vaulot one of the last Knight's Crosses of the war on Hitler's authority. The next morning, Hitler is dead. Here is what the citation does not mention. By the time Vaulot fired his first Panzerfaust that morning, Berlin was surrounded by 6,250 Soviet tanks. Germany had perhaps 50 operational Panzers left in the entire city. The Panzerfaust was not a weapon of dominance, it was a weapon of mathematics. And the mathematics said this: when you have run out of tanks, run out of fuel, run out of trained crews, run out of everything that made the Wehrmacht the most feared army on earth, you hand a steel tube to a 22-year-old Frenchman and hope for the best. This is the story of the Panzerfaust, the only weapon Germany built that actually obeyed the rules of industrial warfare, and the brutal irony of a nation that understood those rules only after it was already dead. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, weapons, and doctrine, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more in-depth World War analysis. Let's continue. 6 tanks, 6 kills, a 30 Reichsmark tube against a 46-ton machine, and it still wasn't enough to save a single city block. By late 1944, Berlin's propaganda machine had a new star, not a tiger, not a panther, a disposable tube. Newsreels showed Volkssturm militia, old men, teenage boys, training with Panzerfauste. The message? Every German citizen is now a tank killer. The reputation was not propaganda fiction. The Panzerfaust earned genuine fear across every front. Allied tankers called the threat Faust fever. British tank losses attributed to Panzerfauste rose from 6% in Normandy to roughly 34% in the final months. In urban combat across eastern Germany, approximately 70% of tanks destroyed fell to Panzerfauste or Panzerschrecks. The specifications justified the anxiety. The Panzerfaust 60 weighed 6.1 kilograms. Its 149mm shaped charge warhead penetrated 200mm of armor, enough to defeat any tank on Earth from any angle. Training time: minutes. Raise the sight, squeeze the lever, discard the tube. Cost? 15 to 30 Reichsmarks. A Tiger one consumed approximately 300,000 Reichsmarks. One Tiger equaled 10 to 20,000 Panzerfauste. The Panzerfaust demanded stamped sheet metal, black powder, and prisoners. The weapon proved itself in the worst conditions imaginable. In Berlin's April street fighting, the 2nd Guards Tank Army under Colonel General Bogdanov reported 576 vehicles disabled, 106 of them, or 18.4%, caused by Panzerfauste. General Chuikov, commanding the 8th Guards Army, noted that unsupported tank columns sent down main streets were trapped and systematically destroyed. Panzerfauste knocked out the lead and rear vehicles, then infantry teams moved in to kill the rest. Soviet commanders began assigning infantry platoons to every tank company specifically to counter Panzerfaust teams. The weapon forced a doctrinal change in the Red Army during its final campaign. Even the enemy recognized what Berlin had built. The US 82nd Airborne captured Panzerfauste in Normandy, finding them superior to their own. Bazookas, American paratroopers kept them, dropped with them into the Netherlands during Market Garden, and used captured stockpiles through the Ardennes. The enemy was using Germany's weapon because it was better than their own. The myth was real. Every stat checked out. The Panzerfaust could kill any tank on Earth. What it couldn't do was arrive in 1941. Between August 1943 and May 1945, Hasag factories delivered 8.25 million Panzerfaust units across 21 months. That is more than every German tank, assault gun, and armored vehicle produced in 6 years of war combined. German industry built approximately 1,839 Tigers, 6,000 Panthers, and over 10,500 Sturmgeschütz 3s, fewer than 20,000 total. The Panzerfaust exceeded that combined production within 18 months. Peak production tells the story even more starkly. The Panzerfaust 30 alone hit 200,000 per month by October 1943. The Panzerfaust 60 reached 400,000 complete weapons monthly by October 1944. In the final weeks, factories were turning out 5,000 per day. For the cost of one Tiger, Germany could have produced 10 to 20,000 Panzerfäuste. One Tiger destroyed approximately 10 enemy tanks across its entire operational career. 20,000 Panzerfäuste statistically destroyed far more. The Panzerfaust is the confession. It is the proof that German industry could build simple, mass-produced, effective weapons. It chose not to for almost the entire war. Here's the part they do not show in documentaries. In March 1944, Albert Speer designated Hasag, Hugo Schneider, AG, as sole manufacturer under Hochlauf Panzerfaust. Hasag fulfilled its monopoly through a subcamp network, staffed by concentration camp prisoners. At Schlieben, a satellite of Buchenwald, prisoners filled 1.5 million warheads per month with TNT and trihexogen mixture. The explosive compound was packed by hand, causing toxic hepatitis and bone marrow suppression. Medical records documented an average prisoner life expectancy of 2 months, driven by poisoning, 12-hour shifts, and deliberate caloric restriction to 800 daily calories. The Leipzig main camp held over 10,000 forced laborers by January 1945, with thousands more at Taucha, Altenburg, Muselwitz, Kolditz, and Flossburg. By April 1945, Hasag had produced over 6 million weapons, while recording tens of thousands of prisoner deaths. The cheapest weapon in Germany's arsenal carried the highest human price. Every Panzerfaust that killed a Soviet tank was assembled by hands that would not survive the war. Summer 1942. Dr. Heinrich Langweiler's workshop at Hasag Leipzig held a crude steel tube, 80 centimeters long. Engineers stenciled Gretchen on the prototype, a recoilless gun requiring no precision bore, no rifling, no machining tolerances. The design philosophy was the precise opposite of everything Germany had built until that point. No optical sight, a folding metal tab. No crew, one soldier. No logistics chain, issued like ammunition, discarded after one shot. Gretchen's warhead traveled 28 meters before tumbling. Langweiler increased the propellant charge, extending range to 30 meters by March 1943. This became Panzerfaust 30 Klein, entering service August 1943. Range remained the unsolved variable. The disposable tube could not withstand higher pressures without thicker steel, adding weight that contradicted the no logistics doctrine. Langweiler's solution: split the charge. Autumn 1943 brought the Panzerfaust 30 Gross with sequential ignition. Early 1944 introduced the Panzerfaust 60, doubled range to 60 meters. September 1944 brought the Panzerfaust 100, tripling effective distance to 100 meters. Each extension solved through propellant chemistry rather than manufacturing complexity. February 1945 brought the Panzerfaust 150 with a reloadable tube. Around 100,000 produced, almost none reaching the front before Soviet forces overran the Tigers factories. The engineers who built the Tiger asked, How do we build the most powerful tank? Langweiler asked. How do we kill a tank for 30 Reichsmarks? Only one question had a correct answer, but the weapon that killed Soviet tanks for pennies had a weakness no engineering could fix. Effective range was 30 to 60 meters, roughly the distance from home plate to the pitcher's mound. A soldier had to let a 46-ton tank drive close enough to see the rivets on the hull. The backblast created a 3-meter fatal radius behind the firer. Volkssturm soldiers firing from enclosed rooms died from their own weapon's discharge. Each shot announced the operator's position through a flame signature visible across entire city blocks. The Panzerfaust asked something no other weapon asked: the courage to stand still while the tank drove close enough to crush you. Soviet forces adapted rapidly. Infantry platoons screened ahead of tank columns. Assault groups cleared buildings floor by floor. Crews welded improvised bed spring armor, in practice mostly ineffective, but it gave them something to believe in. Where clearance proved too costly, 152mm howitzers and 203mm heavy guns leveled entire blocks, rather than accepting casualties from 30 Reichsmark tubes. The archival data tells a different story than the legend. The traditional narrative claims 700 Soviet tanks destroyed by Panzerfaust in Berlin. Bogdanov's Second Guards Tank Army reported 576 vehicles disabled total, 106 or 18.4% from Panzerfaust. On the Second Ukrainian Front in February 1945, only 2 of 160 tank damage instances came from Panzerfaust, 0.5%. American post-war analysis found Panzerfaust accounted for approximately 7.5% of Allied tank losses across all theaters, rising to 25 to 35% in urban combat. The Panzerfaust was devastating in the rubble. In open country, where the war was actually decided, it was a brave man's death. Sentence fired from too close. On October 18, 1944, the Volkssturm decree mobilized old men and boys. Their primary anti-tank weapon, the Panzerfaust. Berlin handed a Panzerfaust to a 16-year-old and called it a strategy. The 16-year-old had to let a T-34 drive close enough to touch before he could fire. This was not tactics. This was human trafficking disguised as national defense. Here is the mathematics. Germany produced 8.25 million Panzerfaust in 21 months. The Soviets brought 6,250 tanks to Berlin. They could afford to lose 1 in 5. They could afford to lose 2 in 5. Soviet industry produced 29,000 T-34s in 1944 alone. Berlin's losses were replaceable within 3 weeks of factory output. Germany had nothing left to replace. The Panzerfaust's true legacy is not on the battlefield. The Soviet RPG-2, the weapon that defined guerrilla warfare for 50 years, took direct inspiration from captured Panzerfaust designs. The modern Panzerfaust III, issued to the Bundeswehr and sent to Ukraine in 2022, carries the same name and the same principle: a simple tube, a shaped charge, one soldier, one shot. The idea survived. The Reich did not. Eugene Volo destroyed 6 Soviet tanks on April 29, 1945. He received a Knight's Cross presented by Krukenberg that evening. 18 hours later, Hitler was dead. The tubes he fired cost less than a good pair of boots. The tanks he killed cost thousands of hours of Ural factory labor. And the city he was defending fell 72 hours later. Germany built the most expensive tanks in the history of warfare. And in the end, the weapon that actually worked was a disposable tube designed by a man named Langweiler, assembled by prisoners who would not survive the month, and fired by boys who would not survive the week. The Panzerfaust was not the best weapon of the war. It was the most honest. And honesty for the Reich always arrived too late. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.